Hello, my name is Lisa Froschog, and I work for the City and County of Denver's Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Today, I am very excited to present on a project that we are so proud of called the Platte Farm Open Space Project. And the presentation title is Corridor of Opportunity, Transforming a Brownfield Site into a Community Amenity out at Platte Farm Open Space in Denver, Colorado. This project was a partnership between the community, the nonprofit Groundwork Denver, the Mile High Flood District, the Department of Parks and Recreation, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, the Department of Community Planning and Development, as well as the Department of Public Health and Environment. My role on the project was as the planning and design project manager for the drainage specific elements of the project. The project location is just 10 minutes outside of the downtown Denver area. It's only 5 minutes away from Rhino, close by the intersection of I-25 and I-70. And if you're familiar with Denver neighborhoods, it's located within the historic Globeville neighborhood. In terms of storm drainage, it is located within the Globeville, Utah Junction major drainage basin, and all of the flows are eventually end up in the South Platte River before they exit the city and county of Denver. In terms of overland flow, the built environment and topography for this basin are pretty unique. And so what this image shows is the topography with a heat map where the red is a high point and the blue is the low point. From west to east as you travel, that's how the water flows over the land. And if there was no development at all, it would make its way into South Platte River unobstructed. However, there are some features in the built environment that act as levees, such as the railroads and the highways, and they prevent water from traveling in that west to east fashion seamlessly. And instead, much of the water has to be directed through underpasses. Where the red star is, that's where the Platte Farm Open Space Project is located. And you can see that the area is just at the boundary of that part where the basin gets pretty low and flat. In terms of the local flooding, so not including the overflows or the South Platte River floodplain, just local flooding, like I said, generally, water flows from west to east or from left to right across the image. And much of the water that contributes to the Platte Farm Open Space Project comes from the 48th Ave underpass. What this map shows in blue is our Flow 2D model results for the potential inundation area, we call it at the city, which is all of the Flow 2D model results that exceed 1 foot during the 100-year event. And so that's what the light blue is showing on the chart. For site-specific conditions, it's a very large project limit where it's a 5-acre brownfield site. Before the project and even afterwards, the primary use of the project is as a transmission line easement for Xcel Energy. And so much of the parcels before the project was initiated were owned by Xcel Energy. And there were a few that were owned by the city and county of Denver, and then a few that were owned by ASARCO. And the reason that it has a brownfield site dictation is that it was a historic EPA Superfund site because there is a smelter, or there was a smelter, that was located just a quarter-mile north of this property. And that smelter, for many, many years, it doesn't anymore, had melted down different metals, and then that was deposited through the smoke that the factory emitted all through the Globeville neighborhood. And that's what the EPA Superfund designation was from. And between 1993 and 2011, there was a remediation effort that took place all across Globeville, where the individual owners of the parcels were able to decide if they wanted to have their land remediated in a way that they would excavate 12 inches of soil or put a 12-inch cap of soil. And so for the platform open space 5-acre property, there was a mix between that excavated and completely clean soil versus there were some areas that there was a cap. And so that made it a little bit challenging for the project design teams in terms of grading and excavation. This is a photo that shows the pre-project site conditions, and it's an extremely beautiful and unique location within the city and county of Denver, where if you weren't able to see the Denver city skyline, you might think you were in the eastern plains of Colorado. And in fact, it's also unique because many of the adjacent homeowners in this region, which they lovingly call the valley, many residents have occupied this valley for generations. And one resident in particular, his family, he said, has lived there for over 100 years. And so it's this vast, peaceful section of the city where you hardly feel like you're close to the city at all. There is, it's very interesting because adjacent homeowners even had horses and let their horses roam around the property. There are lots of deer that come through here, foxes, birds, and so the neighborhood takes great pride in the natural elements of the property. However, over the years, the community started to recognize that there was some unwanted activity that was occurring within their valley, and they started experiencing dumping, late night joyrides, people abandoning cars, partying, as well as when I showed the image of the topography, some flooding because it's a lot of water coming from upstream, and this is where the basin flattens out. And so in 2006, the community members took a stand, and instead of complaining to the city about the illegal activity or the flooding, what they wanted to do is have stake in the solution. And so they contacted their city council office and the Civic Association, as well as a local nonprofit, Groundwork Denver, and they started working to brainstorm a solution. That was in 2006. And so since the very inception of this project, it's been a community-led effort where over this 10-year period between when the project started, or when the project community members started the project and design started, the community would work over a 10-year period tirelessly on project outreach, project planning, and project fundraising. And so this is a photo of one of the residents that his family has lived in the valley for over 100 years, Dave Oletsky. That was a major contributor to the project planning and vision. And he is presenting in 2013 to the community about the plans for the valley and the project, the stakeholders. And so it was a very unique effort where the community was intimately involved with the planning of this effort. In 2016, a total of 10 years after the project started, the project design began with the vision and design objectives that were identified largely by the community. And so that vision was to create a low maintenance open space area where the residents and visitors could recreate, exercise, and most importantly, connect with nature. They wanted it to be a safe place, and they wanted to maintain that natural look and feel. The design objectives specifically were to restore the grassland, to integrate pollinator gardens. A big piece of the puzzle that I was involved with was the stormwater infrastructure. So installing stormwater infrastructure and a detention pond to prevent flooding, which that was identified in Mile High Flood District's outfall systems plan for the basin. And then they also wanted to create park amenities, not playgrounds, but subtle park amenities such as seating areas and walkways that the community could enjoy the space by. Initially, to simplify the project coordination and funding, the decision was made between the two project partners, Denver Parks and Rec, and the Department of Public Works at the time, which is now the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, to delineate a boundary between the parks and the stormwater elements. And so that boundary was initially the 49th Avenue, where anything north of 49th Avenue was to be 100% parks elements, and anything south of 49th Avenue would be where the detention pond and all of the drainage would occur. And initially, we thought that that would simplify the cost sharing. But once we got a little bit further into design, we realized that there were a significant amount of flow. There was a significant amount of flow coming from the north, that it would be beneficial if we could gather it through depressions and inlets and direct it to that detention pond to provide greater protection for some of those northern residents along Grant and Logan Street. And so the boundary was eventually eliminated so that we could do just that. What it ended up doing was resulting in a greater overall benefit, but it did produce some unavoidable design rework with the site survey. And then there was a lot more coordination in terms of line items for the cost share and coordination of who pays for what when the entire project area has multiple benefits and multiple stakeholders. And so once the parks and stormwater elements were combined, the difficult work began of creating a design that meant all of the stakeholder goals and interests. And balancing those project goals included the drainage level of service conversations, where the drainage team wanted to provide a maximum drainage level of service, Denver Parks and Rec park priorities. There were really strong opinions, because this was a community-led effort on the community's vision and what they wanted to see at the project site, including what trees they wanted to keep and what elements of their vision they needed to have in the final product design. And then there were city standards that we had to meet, or some that we challenged, such as curb and gutter, where the community vision conflicted the city standard to have curb and gutter. And so that was something that we had to work through and challenge. There was also environmental goals and considerations that limited the amount of work that we could do. And then finally, the cost was something that needed to be balanced with all of the other project goals. And this took a lot of coordination, so much so with all of the project stakeholders and all of the project goals and interests, that it was not uncommon to have 15 project partners or 15 people at design project meetings. And this, mind you, was in a time pre-COVID where scheduling and getting everyone in the same room was very difficult. However, in 2019, in the fall of 2019, we were able to work together and finalize, by a miracle, a design that met everyone's desires. Some design elements that were integrated from a drainage perspective that helped achieve a seamless integration of detention features throughout the park. One of them was a varied bottom pond design. And so initially our goal was to provide residents with the maximum amount of storm protection possible. If we went with a 100-year detention pond in this very, very limited amount of space, what it would end up looking like is a giant bowl with very high boulder walls. And from the very beginning, we got pushback from both the community and Denver Parks and Rec that that was just not going to be attainable. And so we integrated a beautiful varied bottom pond design, which achieved between a 25 and a 50-year storm protection at the end of the project. Another design element that we integrated to ensure that the project looked like a park and not like a drainage facility was a grasscrete forebay. And so in between concrete elements of the forebay, there would be vegetation that would grow to make it look seamless. However, when maintenance needed to occur, a truck could go in and scrape all of that vegetation away, and the roots would still be intact so that it would grow back the next season. We're really, really excited about how the vegetation came in on this project. And so the photo on the right is that application of that grasscrete forebay. And then finally, we integrated pollinator garden entrances and exits throughout the site that concentrated really beautiful, beautiful landscape elements, and that will provide habitat for bugs and bees and a beautiful entrance for the community. Construction kicked off in January of 2020. This is an aerial at the very beginning of construction, and we were very lucky that the community was so involved in the planning and design because it made public outreach extremely simple, and this is not a very popular transportation route of the city, and so transportation detours were not that difficult for the project. We reached the middle of construction just 4 months later in May of 2020. This is an aerial looking north, so from the detention pond north of the construction midway through. And then finally, just 2 months later, the construction team was wrapping up with their efforts. And so once the project was under construction, it moved quite rapidly. There were many lessons learned during project construction that could honestly be their very own CASWM presentation. Those included Excel relocation issues where we had to, in the very beginning of construction, there were a few instances where the Excel poles were not relocated in the appropriate location, and then the decision was made to underground, which delayed the project and resulted in coordination with the BNSF property. There was bedrock that was experienced during the detention pond excavation it was encountered during the excavation of the detention area that could have been avoided if we had only done more bores during the design. And then lastly, the decision was made to substitute a material called polypave, to substitute the crusher fines trail for polypave, and our construction team was not especially happy about that. But There will be a few members from our construction team on the Q&A session of this call. If you have any specific questions of construction lessons learned, they would be more than happy to expand on those. And this final aerial is one of the full site established, and that was taken this summer. And what I love looking at and highlighting is that it's almost impossible to distinguish where the detention and stormwater elements begin and end on the park. And that was a big commitment to the Department of Parks and Rec, to the community when integrating the stormwater management elements into the park, is that there would be seamless integration. And so the detention area of the park is the furthest north, or the top part of the photo, and you can see that it's very difficult to distinguish that it's any different than the rest of the park. We, as a team, as the city, as the district, all of the consultants that helped with this project, the community, the city council office, we are all so very proud of the Platform Open Space project and believe strongly that the community's vision to develop a safe space for community to connect with nature was met. After 14 years of hard work by the original community members and the nonprofit, they were able to celebrate in August of 2020 the park opening. And 4 or 5 of these individuals pictured here were involved through the entire 15-year process. And so it's an extremely unique project. And if you're ever in the Globeville neighborhood, I would highly suggest going out and taking a look at the project. And I cannot emphasize enough that project success was driven by the intentional collaboration of all of the project partners and the countless hours invested by all of the individuals on this slide. Like I said, it was a partnership between the community, Groundwork Denver, the City Council Office, Mile High Flood District, the Department of Parks and Rec, Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, Mueller Engineering, Valerian, ECI, Great Ecology, the Department of Public Health and Environment, DHM, Design, Western States, ERO, Pinion, and so many more. With that, I'd like to end with a short drone flyover, thanks to Mueller Engineering, and then open the floor for questions.